Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, gather round, metaphorically speaking, of course. Today we're cracking open a text that acts as this incredibly dark, totally compelling doorway. We're looking at a short, genuinely chilling source document literally titled True Nightmares Beyond Belief. I mean, just let those words sit with you for a second. We aren't breaking down dark fantasy here. No, we're looking at how language frames the macabre when it steps right out of the shadows of fiction and straight into the cold, hard light of reality. Okay, let's dive into this. The immediate tension right off the bat, it comes from jamming the word true right up against the word nightmares. Think about it. By strict definition, a nightmare is supposed to just be a phantom of the mind, right? It's just our brain's way of safely processing fear and anxiety while we're sound asleep in bed. But this source text, it shatters that psychological safety net instantly with that one word true. It's basically telling us that the monsters, the inescapable dread, yeah, they aren't confined to your sleep. They're actually walking around in the waking world. And then it pushes the envelope even further with beyond belief, which is like saying, hey, even when you see this stark truth, your human brain is going to completely struggle to accept it.
Moving right along, Section 1, Defining Real-Life Horror.
So the crucial point is how this text explicitly uses the phrase real-life horror stories to give us a real jolt. Let's break down how those words function together. Usually, a story is a crafted narrative, something whipped up for entertainment or just pure escapism. And horror is a genre meticulously designed to gross you out or terrify you. But throwing real life in front of them, that anchors those abstract concepts into concrete, undeniably real events. The text is letting us know up front that these aren't just spooky campfire tales someone made up. They're factual accounts. They deliberately break right through that boundary of fictional fear, absolutely demanding that we acknowledge the dark anomalies existing in the actual everyday world we navigate.
All right, shifting gears a bit. Section 2, Why Truth Sounds Fake.
It is just fascinating how methodically the source layers this premise, using just a handful of perfectly chosen words. First up, true nightmares. That immediately establishes the presence of terror in our reality. Next, we have beyond belief, which preemptively validates our own skepticism. Like, yeah, we know you won't believe this. Then comes real-life horror, completely reaffirming that this dread is factual and documented. And finally, the ultimate hook, sounding fake. The text knows exactly how human psychology works. It completely anticipates your disbelief. By openly acknowledging right off the bat that these events sound fake, it disarms our defensive reflexes. It sneaks right past our critical filters by basically saying, hey, I know you won't believe this, but it actually happened anyway. Let's move on and see how this builds in Section 3, the ultimate paradox. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute friction sitting right at the core of this text. On one side, we've got real-life horror stories. That's undeniable, fully documented, terrifying reality. But then, on the other side, we have that sound fake. This represents the totally unbelievable, the absurd, the events that perfectly mimic a completely made-up story. When you smash these two opposing ideas together, you create this deeply unsettling cognitive dissonance. Because, look, as humans, we desperately want real things to make logical sense, right? We really want our reality to be predictable, mundane, safe. But the source text is basically warning us that the most terrifying real-life events are actually the ones that defy logic and probability so completely, they sound exactly like a cheap Hollywood script.
Now, before we wrap up, we absolutely have to look at the very first words of the text, excerpts from. It is such a tiny, easily overlooked phrase, but man, it carries some massive implications here. I mean, an excerpt is just a piece, right? A fragment, just a tiny, carefully curated slice of a much, much larger whole. By labeling these accounts as mere excerpts, the text is heavily implying that there's this entire vast repository of these true nightmares beyond belief just sitting out there. These real-life horrors that sound totally fake, they aren't isolated freak accidents. There's an entire catalog of them, and we are literally only getting a tiny, terrifying glimpse through the keyhole. Which brings us to our final, lingering question. By playing around with all these linguistic contradictions, the source fundamentally messes with our ability to trust our own disbelief. It practically forces us to ask, if a true nightmare actually sounds fake, how on earth do we ever recognize a real-life horror when it's standing right in front of us? If the absolute most terrifying truths are cloaked in the sheer absurdity of fiction, well, maybe our natural instinct to just shake our heads and say, nope, that can't possibly be real, is exactly the thing that makes us so vulnerable to the nightmare. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the boundaries of what you read, and I'll catch you next time.